We're moving into a next version of the industry where if you crack hiring, you've got a huge advantage over any of your competitors, because the difference is what customer buys from you every day. I've never found one. If I hire the right team member, they might be with me 15, 20, or 30 years. They show up every day. I think that's the big benefit that we're talking about.
Less stress, more time, more money. Welcome to the Cash Flow Contractor. Interview.
Martin, who's the last employee you hired? Do you remember? It's been a while.
I really don't. I remember the last one I fired because it was kind of a big deal. Yeah, probably 15 years.
It was a big deal.
I've forsworn at this point having more employees.
You've got a really good business for it as a business coach, but if you're in some sort of construction trade, you have to have a team.
Few people jump me on it because I preach all the time a highly profitable business that can work without you. That's the goal. And you can't do that without people. I mean, you really can't. I guess there'll be some electronic types of ways, technologies, but really they're the first and most enduring form of leverage. Not just the employees who are doing work in the field, but your successors and the people you're going to delegate to. So if you want to grow a business to sell, or a successful business that can work without you, your constant attention, it requires hiring people.
It does. Well, we've got Matt DiBara. Welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Did I say the last name right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. I know. I actually don't feel bad if I say someone's last name right, because everyone says my last name wrong. It's just part of it. You just don't say my last name. It's too complicated. No, thanks for coming on. And you're with Contractor Consultants, but you've got a huge background in the construction industry that we're going to dive into. And really the topic of the episode is hiring. And I'm excited to talk and walk through the entire process. But why don't you tell us, you're from the Boston area, you're now in LA. Tell us about how you got to where you are right now and your family's background in construction.
Well, it starts like any good story. It's a love story. When my grandparents got together, so on the East Coast, when they got together, both their fathers, so my great grandfathers were contractors or builders. And so they both built their homes from the ground up. My great grandfathers, both of them. And then my grandfather took over. It became a business when they started working for neighbors. So people would say, hey, I saw you built this house, can you help me with this? And it just grew from there. Went on to my grandfather, my father, my uncle. And then I started real young because all I knew was my dad working in the field. And if I wanted to see him, I had to work. So 9 years old was when I started, and I quickly grew in the business because my dad was he was old school. It was like, hey, here you go. Here's the shovel, figure it out. And that was kind of the start of the journey. And my role in the company was really seeing how things were done, and then being a younger person, optimizing and growing the business, and really looking at how I could modernize it, given our family history.
Wow. I'm sure you mentioned to us earlier that you moved the company from the East Coast all the way to Los Angeles. I'm sure for warmer weather and maybe some other reasons. But what was like the biggest challenge with that migration?
A lot. Oh my gosh. How much time do we have?
We got time.
I grew in the business. So there was a little bit of a struggle of who was going to take it over. Like, in the sense that, like, my dad was like, hey, I want you to take this thing over. But when it came time, it was a little bit, that transition was difficult. And so I got licensed when I was in college. We got to a boiling point where, not in a negative way, but in the sense of, I saw the yellow pages going out, and I saw websites and this new age coming in. And I said, look, we got to modernize. Like, we got to take control of our marketing. We need to hit this next generation, this next wave. And he's like, this stuff doesn't work. And he says, if you think you could do better, do it yourself. So I got licensed in college, and I signed up for some lead gen platforms. And I was a sophomore. I had a old pickup truck, and I was doing jobs nights and weekends. And I got a call for this big restoration project, like right around $250,000. And I couldn't do it. So I called my dad up, and I said, hey, Pops, I got this job. Do you want it? And I said, this is what it is. He goes out and he closes it, calls me up, and he's like, hey, maybe we should talk. This lead gen thing works. He's like, And here, I think you're right. So, we had our thing figured out. But while I was licensed, the point of the story is while I was licensed, I was working on my own, and I realized because I was doing a little soul searching, I was like, I don't think I like the cold, and so that was really the main driver for moving the company out. But I took kind of a step out for I was still helping them and doing bids, but took a step out for 6, 8. It was like an 8 month stint we laugh about. But that really sparked the space for me to think about what do I want to do, where do I want to go. I
Mhm.
don't like the cold weather. And then that led to, well, I had a friend in California, let's give this a shot.
Excellent. Cool. And so how long you been in California now?
Ooh, that's a good question. About 10
Really?
years, 9.5, 10 years now.
Wow. Okay.
So you went out there with,
Excellent.
you
Nice.
walked away from all your referrals and local references and known quantities. And so basically completely
Yeah.
started over except with the knowledge that you had.
Yeah, we had the family history. It's like I joke, but like my family's Italian. If you think of an Italian restaurant, it's like I took the recipe book and that old school teaching, and I went out and it went to the West Coast. And my grandfather used to say, he'd say, because we started working for neighbors, he said, look, if you treat every customer like they're your neighbor, you'll never make the wrong decision. I remember him telling me that when I was 10 years old. And so there was like these little adages that I realized later in life served as the building blocks for how I was able to be successful in LA. But it was those old school things that I was taught.
That's awesome. I love it. So, part of you mentioned that now you're up to like 15 crews. You guys, and you're doing, I don't know if we've said what you're actually doing. Your masonry, is that right?
Yeah, masonry, concrete. We're licensed generals too. But that's
Okay.
usually just because we tie in other work, so we have
Sure.
that. Yeah,
Okay.
residential, commercial, and then we do some prevailing wage and government work.
Okay. Excellent. So, obviously, getting up to 15 crews, you've had a lot of hiring in the past 10 years. And I'm sure that it hasn't all been glamorous, but I think you've probably figured it out by this point. And now you've got this newer endeavor called Contractor Consultants. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was born out of pain and necessity. It wasn't. I wish I had a better story for why it came about. I happened so moving from the Boston area and being in masonry and concrete. When I moved to Los Angeles, there was a shortage of masons, concrete finishers in a big way, and so it was like swinging a baseball bat, and I had a 50-pound weight on my bat because I just couldn't find people. And the problem with that was the market was really good. And so right around 20, sort of in 2019, right around 2019, 2020, I was at the pinnacle of my LA business. I was doing a couple celebrity homes. I had a big government job. We were doing the Los Angeles National Cemetery, big ribbon cutting ceremony. And I wasn't paying attention to the struggles of hiring. So we're selling work. I thought because I was brought up in 2008, right? So I saw people go out of business for not having work. I didn't think you could go out of business for having too much work. I didn't realize that, but I hadn't learned that lesson yet. So, I'm selling. I joke that I'm a recovering sales junkie because I thought if you sold enough work, right, like that's it. That's all you had to do. And so pinnacle of the business. We're selling work. My management team, project manager, site super, they're like, hey, Matt, we can't find anybody. I'm like, well, call so and so. He's a small company. He'll come help us. He's like, yeah, we did. Doesn't want to help. I'm like, okay, post another ad on Craigslist. We've been doing that for 2 weeks, not working. So I had all this work. I lost nearly $1 million in the span of 3 weeks. It was jobs canceling, jobs overrun. And so I almost killed the family brand in business. And that set about a journey for me to reinvent the next version of myself because I was proud of the fact that, I was like, I modernized the business. I understood sales and marketing, right? But then I didn't do any of that on the hiring. I was hiring like my grandfather hired. And so I was laughing because I was like, gosh, that lesson that I was trying to teach my dad, I fell victim to. And that started a quest to figure out what worked. And the LA market just happened to be really difficult. So I had to learn how to, 20% of our hires we had to bring from other cities and states in the country just because there wasn't enough people to meet demand. But it lent to a system that I figured out over the course of about a year and a half that then served as the foundation for what we teach and do for other people. To give you a little bit of backstory as to how
Oh,
it
Yeah,
came
that's
about.
great.
fantastic.
That's great. So, you said you're recovering sales junkie. How similar do you feel like the marketing sales process is to the hiring process of looking for customers versus looking for clients?
I think it's a mirror, even down to the point where I think the emphasis for a lot of us is on sales and marketing, but we've got a lot of resources now. There's a lot out there to help on the sales and marketing side. On the hiring side, it's so local specific that I think they mirror each other, but I think we're moving into another generation, a next version of the industry where I think hiring is really, I mean, if you crack hiring, and you've got a huge advantage over any of your competitors, because the difference is if I sell a customer, right? I might have that customer, maybe I got them on a membership plan, or maybe there's some type of reoccurring commercial relationship. But if I sell or hire the right team member, they might be with me 15, 20, or 30 years. What customer buys from me every day? I've never found one. If you find any, let me know, right? But like
Yeah.
the internal customer, they show up every day. And I think that's the big benefit that we're talking about.
No, that's great. I once heard, I think it was the COO of Chipotle say that they're not in the business of selling burritos and food, that they're actually in the business of retaining
And advancing.
like low entry labor. Just if we can retain low entry labor, we've done it. And that's like their
Well,
biggest challenge is hiring. Just can they keep someone at $12 an hour, $15 an hour employed and to stay there? So, really interesting. Well, let's dive into a process for hiring. What do you see most construction companies out there doing? What were you doing before this? You kind of already referenced a couple of things, looking for the small contractor, see if he'd jump on, posting it out on Craigslist. But what do you see most people doing?
well, I think the first thing that starts before you do anything is a shift in mindset.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is if I was standing in front of a group of people and I said, okay, how many of you raise your hand if you want to grow your business? Right? Hands go up. Okay. Raise your hand if you have a revenue goal. You want to grow your business by a certain amount of revenue. You're doing 5 million, you want to go to 10. You're doing 10, you want to go to 20, right? Maybe you're doing a million, you want to go to 2. Okay. What's the org chart you have under the current business? Now, what's the org chart you need to support the business growth and revenue that you want to have?
Hmm.
Now, when I do this in real life, the hands go up. People know the revenue that they want to achieve. They have some idea or strategy about what they want to do to achieve that revenue, right? Sales, marketing, business development. Maybe it's a rebrand, right? Maybe it's acquisitions. There's all these different ways. But now you look at that org chart. What is your clear, predictable, proven track record plan to fill these positions? And how many positions do you need? So it's like we I equate it to, it's like thinking about a destination that you want to go to. That's your revenue. But like what vehicle and road you're going to take is the employees and the team to support that. And so it starts with a shift of mindset. I think if every business owner listening made the owl their company mascot, they would be way better off. And what I mean by that is if you think of an owl, what does an owl do? It says who, and it can rotate its head all the way around. I think if every business owner spun their head around, looking around for who all the time, and the owl became your company mascot, like if you take one thing away from this and it becomes that, and you ask yourself constantly, who do I need and where can I find them is the follow-up question. I
Yeah.
think your business would transform. It's mental real estate first, and then we get into like all the things that you can do. But the size of the problem and the size of the opportunity, I think, are
Mm.
greatly underestimated.
Man, really, really great. A lot of what we talk about on here, you're just firing off on all cylinders. So I love to hear it. And it sounds like that mindset really it leads to you thinking about the identity of your company and what you really need. Like who do I need? Where can I find them? What are some of the identity pieces? And when I say identity, I kind of mean like for me, vision for your company. Like you mentioned, revenue goal. Where are we going? What are our goals? What's our mission? What are the values that we have? What are our core behaviors we want our employees to embody? How do you go through a discovery of, outlining that business identity with your customers as a consultant?
So, great question. It starts with an exercise that we go through called "Would you work for you?" and
Nope.
it's very simple, right? So you go online, you pretend you know nothing about your company, and you Google yourself, and you looking at your website again as a candidate. So you might have great customer videos. You might have these amazing customer reviews, right? Client reviews. You might have some videos that show the kind of work you do. But remember, I'm looking to work for your company. I'm not looking to buy from your company, right? So it's a completely different messaging. So the exercise of would you work for you sets the foundation for, is my brand, my hiring brand, set up for success? Do I have a video that showcases, other people working here with cuts as a testimonial of those people? I've been here 20 years, Matt's a great boss, I pay him to say that, right? No. So it's that brand, right? Do you have a career page or a beautiful page that showcases the benefits? And then once you have that, or while you're looking for that, you get to do the next thing. So here's what baffles me. Done this many times in live events. I'll ask people, how many of you know your competitors? How many of you know that if you bid a job and XYZ company bids it, you'll never get it? Or every time XYZ company bids it, you're going to come in 10% lower because they're that one company that maybe charges a little bit more than you, but you're better, right? Like most business owners, we know our competitors, but what about our hiring competitors? So if I'm a candidate, right? I'm a carpenter and I live in Oklahoma. I just moved there. What am I going to do? What's the journey? So I might go online and say, carpentry, foreman positions, Oklahoma, the city I'm in. Who shows up? Who's competing for that candidate's real estate? Who are your hiring competitors? So these two exercises set the foundation for who are we actually competing against? Because this is a customer that might be with, internal customer. This is the person that might be with you for 10, 20, 30 years. So it's like, how hard would you fight for a client if I could guarantee you that client would buy from you every day? You'd be billboards, we'd be door knock, like whatever you had to do to land that business. But then when it comes to hiring, most of us, I was guilty of all these things, right? So I'm talking about me here. I didn't know who my hiring competitors were. And then I find out that they've got banner ads. They offer all these benefits that I didn't have. They had these really exciting headlines. You see them on 27 different job boards. So when you type in a position, it's like they own the whole first page. And then I'm looking at it going, well, gosh, this might explain why I was struggling to hire those years back. You can't find me. And when you do, you don't see anything.
Yeah. It's, why do you feel like it's so, for you, why did you overlook it so much? Was it just you couldn't see your own bald spot thing, or did you feel like they weren't as important? I mean, maybe on the East Coast, there were a lot more access to masonry so it wasn't really that big of a challenge. What's your take?
I honestly think for me, it came down to just not. So the mindset of hiring, I remember my dad growing up and, we let somebody go and we replaced him before we got home, literally, right?
Wow.
Like we let him go. He leaves. My dad makes 4 phone calls. Yeah, be at the job, be at the yard at 5:30 a.m. Done. The
Wow.
dynamic shifted, but I don't know that the mindset of the business owner has shifted with it. And I think, like, for example, I didn't really, part of what I built with the course and with what we do was really about solving my needs and trying to help other business owners because, like, I never saw my dad growing up. My dad was one of the hardest working people you'd ever meet. My dad worked Saturdays, worked Sundays, nights, weekends. I mean, 4 a.m. to 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night every day. And I just don't think we did. It's one of those things where it's like, it's one of those great mysteries where I don't know why we don't see it. And that's why I joked about the owl is like, if the amount of VC venture capital money going into our field of construction, and the first question they're asking, and I know because I've consulted with some of these firms, is they're acquiring companies based on the people. So if both things are true, if I could have a business that runs without me, I need a great team, right? Or if I want to sell my business, the people buying it are predominantly going to look heavily at the org chart. They're going to run background checks. They're going to want to know who the senior leadership team is. So it's like, I honestly think part of it is that maybe the big companies don't want to get this out, the real big ones, because there's such a limited pool. So maybe the small and medium-sized businesses, it's like, why would I go out and spill this information to make it more competitive for me? I don't know.
I think one of the main transitions I see with almost everybody, and it is changing, is that it used to be command and control down from the top. And I mean, we're actually years past that now. So it's not a new, but there's still people who think I'm the boss I'll tell you where to show up. They don't realize that people are interviewing them, right? And you're talking about marketing to attract the candidates. And yeah, I love the analogy, the metaphor. It's exactly what it is. And you are being interviewed while you're interviewing that person. And what are you saying?
And you mentioned earlier to that point, how do you find your identity as a company, and how do you amplify that? It starts with understanding what your competitors are doing and auditing, like, what are they doing for pay? What are they doing for benefits? And maybe you're a smaller, medium-sized company and you can't match all of those things, but one thing you can do is take the top 3 people you have in your company that you want to clone. They've been there 12 years, 15 years, right? Maybe 5 if you're a new business. Sit them down individually and spend 30 minutes on an interview. Hey, why do you show up every day? What do you like about working here? What do you, what do you enjoy most about what we do as a company? We do these things with customers, right? So we'll ask a customer, hey, where'd you find us? I found you on through so-and-so. Great. What'd you like about us? Oh, I love this process. So we do the research when it comes to our customers to know how to become a better client facing brand. We can do that same internal audit to figure out, and you'll find crazy things. Maybe it's you celebrate birthdays. Maybe it's for smaller companies like we were at one point. It was the fact that I, as the owner, was intimate with every single person that worked here. So now I've got a competitive advantage from all these big companies. When I was much smaller, 3 crews, interact with the owner every day, one-on-one mentorship and guidance, like growth and connection, right? In the business. And those are what we were able to attract the people that corporation. I remember I hired somebody and I couldn't believe this worked. So I figured this out, started advertising it, hired a site superintendent. And he took the job, and I asked him, I said, okay, we gave you about the same pay. What made you want to work here? He said, I've spent more time with you as the owner of this business in this interview than I have the owner of my company in the last 12 years. He said, that's why I want to work here.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah.
That's such a big thing, though, asking why. Just on the sales and marketing side, how did you hear about us? Like, where did you find us? Was it a Google search? Was it one of our ads that we run on social media? Was it because we put a yard sign in someone's yard? How did you find us? Same exact process for the hiring side. How did you find us? And why did you choose us? What stuck out?
And then if you ever lose anybody, same thing, right? It's like, hey, can I ask you, what is it that you didn't like about us? I'd love to just take a couple minutes of your time and maybe give them something, gift them a coffee or whatever, a gift card to Starbucks, right? Hey, 10 minutes of your time. What was it that this company offered me? I found out one time, vacation time as I was growing was a huge thing. Like I found out that competitors were wiping the floor with us for vacation time. So I had to come up with at the time, this is going back a while, but we came up with, to give strategies to the listeners, like we came up with this way where you could accrue more vacation time. So we were able to advertise in the job posting 4 weeks paid vacation. They come in for the interview, we're telling them how they can get there.
Yeah.
But I got way more attention from the candidates versus my competitors who were saying 2 or 3 weeks, right? So then they're trying to up it. But I didn't know that was such a hot button for this new generation of talent. And so instead of this bonus, I had 2 weeks paid vacation plus bonus. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make the bonus the vacation. You can bonus up to another 2 weeks. We'll show them how to get there. So I reframe the ad. All of a sudden, I'm getting way more applicants.
Yeah. So much of it is perspective.
We had Tom Reber on maybe 2 months ago, and it's one of the points he makes is quit selling to your wallet. You've got these hey, they want money. They can't live on what we're, you think it's that, and that's not it at all. And the other thing you say, he's talking about customers, but they buy from you for their reasons, not yours. Find out what they are. So it's the same thing here. They come work for you for their reasons. All your interviews, understanding what those reasons are, and they're not your reasons.
And I think it's, like, have either of you ever been bitten by a horse?
Actually, I have.
I have not.
Yeah.
Not spent a lot of time with horses.
Most people haven't, right? But most people have been bitten by a mosquito. So what's the analogy here? Sometimes it's the little things that get you, right? And so it's about going deep on those little things, right? Like take the 10 minutes to do the interview with the person that's been there 15 years. Take the 20 minutes to audit your hiring competitors, right? Which we've discussed so far. Take the the 15 or 20 minutes to figure out what maybe a candidate who, if you had 3 or 4 people, even if they took another job, we used to follow up. If I found a really good resume, I would call that person once every 2 weeks, ongoing, even though I knew that they had already taken a job. I'd see online that they updated it to another company. I'm like, I got to know how that company got that person. I have to know. And so, but it's those little details, the mosquitoes, like going deep on these little things that can completely shift your business.
Yeah, man, so good. So let's go back to the process really fast. So I call it mapping. What do you, whenever you're at the beginning, just thinking about who you are as a company, where we're trying to go, who we need, where can we find them? What do you call that first part of that phase?
So in the course, we called it a clear understanding. So it was
Clear
really,
understanding,
yeah.
right? What else are we missing there? Like job description, roles and responsibilities, processes they can follow. Like that's kind of the understanding it, right? Or what else would you add to it, I guess?
So understanding your competitors, understanding who you want,
Mhm.
understanding where to find them, which we can talk about. The other big one is don't hire for unicorns. So
Mm.
I did this. I was guilty. This cost me years. And what I mean by that was, so I used to believe that if you were going to be an estimator at my construction company, you needed to know how to estimate brick, block, stone, tile, stucco, grading, concrete, site work, drainage, and waterproofing. Want to know how I know those so well? Because that was literally on the,
On the ad.
like, that was it. If you could, yeah, if you couldn't tick one of those boxes, you were OUT faster than I could say NO, right? And so part of this setup is we figured out that we ended up niching down the business and focusing. So I've split masonry and concrete up. I pulled the waterproofing division out. I divisionalized the business. And so I was able to triple and quadruple the people that I could bring in. So the first thing, one of the exercises you can do is what we call high skill equals high pay. So before you do anything, take all the key people you have and write down on a daily, weekly, monthly basis what they're doing. And so it's this concept of how do I optimize my team before I maximize? And there's two parts to it. One is looking at, do they actually have to know all of these things? Going back to my estimator example, I was like, well, they don't have to know waterproofing. They don't, I mean, it'd be nice, right? They don't have to know site work and grading. I could split and hire two, senior estimators and have one run one division, run another, like that. So that's one piece. The other one is trim the fat. So if you do this exercise, what you'll find is you might find a project manager that's going around printing plans, and you realize they're spending 3 or 4 hours a week going around picking up office supplies or printing plans, or maybe they're dropping off samples or submittals. So when you take every position and you optimize it first, what you'll find is, oh, I've got efficiency and reallocation already in my company. You might be able to take a project manager and hire 2 project engineers and get the equivalent of 2 really good project managers now. But I hired a lower skill, more available position. So it's that allocation of resources first, and then you go into, all right, what do I need? But that exercise, because it's so difficult, changes the framework.
Man, love that. Just really getting clear on what you actually need and what not being set in your ways. Like you said, it starts with mindset of just kind of opening it up your mind a little bit. Love it. Hey, Cashflow Contractors, really quick. I wanted to ask Martin a question that I get asked all the time. What is business coaching?
Great question. Business coaching, in my mind, is when a coach or mentor or guide comes alongside you in your journey and provides education, information, and accountability to make progress towards goals that you identify. Most of the clients I work with, our goal is to create a profitable business that can work without them and give them their lives back with less stress, more free time, and more money.
I've seen what you do. You're excellent at it. In business, it can be very lonely, but you don't have to be alone. You can pay people to do things for you. It's not usually that helpful, but if you do things with someone alongside you, like a business coach, it's extremely valuable to building a profitable business that runs without you. How can people get started with business coaching?
Best way to do it is to click on a link in my calendar or go to my web page and click on a link and book a time with me at no cost. They're 20-minute or 30-minute sessions. I can understand what you're looking for, and maybe you can understand whether or not I feel that need for you.
Well, we'll put that link down in the show notes. Please click it, schedule a time with Martin. It's free, it's valuable, and maybe you need a business coach. Back to the episode. Okay, so let's say that we have a clear understanding. What's the next step?
So next step is job descriptions. So you've got a compelling job description. You've got your so what is a compelling job description? Talks about your company. You have 3 to 5 key things selling the candidate on why they should work for you. No commute greater than an hour, guaranteed overtime. Like, what are the 3? If I was in an elevator with you and you're trying to recruit me to work for your company, hey, I work for XYZ Roofing. Oh, you'd love this company, man. I get, like, what are the 3 things? I get guaranteed overtime. If my wife, when she was pregnant, they the whole time, they gave me family leave, and they've got this amazing growth plan. Like, I can bonus 20% of my salary, right? Like, boom, boom, boom. Okay, now I want to apply. So job description. When you're posting, understanding where to post. So LinkedIn, huge resource. Really understanding and optimizing LinkedIn.
And I want to talk about that for a second. As we talk about channels, I think, I got even myself at times for certain roles, I think, man, they're probably not on LinkedIn. They didn't go to college, so they probably don't, have that as a channel that they're on. Like, what's your opinion? You think that LinkedIn's awesome, and you're talking about masonry, so let's understand that a little bit more.
Well, so in the course, we have 37 proven ways to find candidates.
There you go.
So it's, the if you've ever been fishing, that sometimes more lines and hooks in the water, the more likely you are to get a fish. And so the game of hiring is it's not always about scalability. I'm not trying to catch 10 fish from this one spot with this one worm. I'm trying to catch one fish, reel it in, and then reevaluate my strategy. I might even go home. I might say I got a big one. I'm good for the day, right?
Yeah.
So when you have that mindset, like, we still hire people off of Craigslist. I found very qualified people off of Craigslist. I found senior, roles in the company off of Craigslist, maybe once every year and a half, my construction company. But it doesn't mean that it's not a viable channel. And so the harder it is to find something, the more diversified you want to be. So it's posting on, if you're not posting to 15 to 20 different job boards, including LinkedIn, you're limiting your chances right off the gate. And then if you are doing that, now it's about, how are you tracking the data? Where are the candidates coming from? And one thing we do for clients when we do this process for them is we keyword and headline test. So we're working with the algorithms. We're trying different headlines. Some might be a touch more corporate. Some might be a little bit more nail on the head, top pay, hiring masons, versus like, growing 4th generation business seeking, qualified masonry applicants. Like, we might try different things because it's just about getting that click in their attention in that first phase, right? We're not, the job description's duty is to sell them on the next phase. The headline is to say, ooh, what's this job?
Yeah. So obviously, glad that you mentioned that this is something that you're helping people with. You've already mentioned a course as well. It just seems like a lot to manage as a business owner when I'm running around also doing the projects, also handling my current employees. And I'm looking for this one fit that I need in the next 2 weeks because we got the job starting. What are some things like ATS, applicant tracking software? Is that something that you recommend people use? What are some tools that people can use to, post to all these different channels and manage the listings and the applicants, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, this is why we started what we do. We never intended to help companies with this, so it happened by accident. We built a course. Basically, my goal was to package all this stuff up, system, right? How do you find them? How do you vet them? How do you hire them? And how do you retain them? And then we got a little bit of hate online when we were advertising the beginning part of it. They're like, if you're so good, fake guru, why don't you just do this for us? And so that stemmed a question in my head, which was, well, maybe we should look into that. And so, if you're doing it yourself, I think the big thing is you got to find somebody that's dedicated to doing this, because it needs time every day, right? Like, if we brush our teeth every day, right? We don't wake up and think, maybe I won't shower today. Like, it's an everyday thing. It just has to happen. And this, going back to our original point about the org chart, right? Most company, I want to go from $1 million to $3 million. Well, the revenue is typically out there, depending on where you are. You just look at the number of competitors you have. So we find usually it's infrastructure and people that hold you back from getting there. So if it is a big opportunity, that's how you solve it. So you need someone that's dedicated, because speed to lead is super important. So a resume comes in, like if we're doing this for a company, we get back to every candidate within 3 to 5 minutes, and we have a call that usually within 24 hours, set, ready to go. And we're able to go through resumes that you can't, if you come at this from the mindset you're looking for a needle in a haystack, which is what it is, you'll look for a needle in a haystack. And what I mean by that is, we hired for a company recently. One of the things I saw was we hired a project manager. He was a teacher for 4 years. That was his most recent career. But if you scroll down on his resume, he had 12 years of project management experience. If you weren't really looking at the resume closely and then had the time to call that person, the average, employer, me 3 years ago, I'm like, teacher for 3 years? Yeah, they don't know construction. Boom, next. This was a phenomenal candidate making career shifts because of changes in their family. But it's about, having that dedicated person that can manage the applicant tracking system, manage the job postings, respond to candidates within 3 to 10 minutes, schedule same day interviews, follow up interviews, background checks, reference checks, candidate, rejection process, because that protects your brand. You don't want to, not properly let somebody know they're not a good fit. So I think that's the hard conversation that we have to have with business owners, is whether you hire someone like us or you do it yourself. Like, you got to find somebody who's going to check the box and say, I own hiring. And that fundamentally is where a lot of businesses have a huge opportunity. Who owns hiring in your company? Like, who is responsible if hiring doesn't progress this month? Who are you pointing a finger at? And usually what you'll find is it's like, well, my project manager does some of the interviews, and, Jack in the office does the job postings, and then Michaela helps when she can. And it's like, okay, so you're going to get 10 people in a room and yell at all of them? That doesn't seem, it's everybody, it's nobody.
Well, that's good advice for anything. Like, who's responsible for material orders? Who's responsible? If you're having to point fingers at 20 different people, then it doesn't work, right? Okay. So we understand that there's a lot involved in just terms of tracking the applicants, but it's really, again, mirroring the sales and marketing process. You get a lead, speed to lead matters, speed to candidate matters. And then also that rejection process is kind of different than with customers, because you do have to reject customers, but it's just not nearly as often as you do with candidates, because you may get 100 applicants for a role and you've got to reject 99.
And do you actually reject them, or you just let them wander off and not respond?
Well, you said protect your brand, so I know where you stand, but why don't you talk to us more about that, Matt?
Well, I think, here's the thing. The hiring is a local game typically, right? Or it ends up being local, even if they don't, at some point it becomes local, right? They're not flying in every day typically, right?
Yeah.
So, they're in your backyard. If you come at it from the perspective of they might know somebody, they might be able to refer somebody, you might have an entry level position. A lot of times we've seen it where we had a company where, like, a mechanic, I'll give you an example. So this is why the applicant tracking system is so important. So we log for our clients all these candidates, everyone that applies, and we reject them respectfully and we let them know why. This mechanic had applied for this carpenter role. Hey, I'm slow, whatever. Well, 4 months later, the company says, we need a yard mechanic, shop mechanic. Well, that person that they rejected really nicely was perfect. We already had him on the list. They ended up hiring him.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a certain level of communication that I think, because ask yourself, what do other companies do and how can I do it different and how can I do it better? Most companies are overwhelmed in the hiring process, So what I found is, if you can do it in a respectful way, if you can let a candidate know, hey, I really appreciate it. I saw you did this and this. You made it second round. Like, here's why we didn't take you on. It's nothing personal. We'll let you know. What would you be interested in? Like, having that data logged and doing that in a really nice way opens the door, especially if you're doing, like, project manager, usually getting people that are underqualified, but who knows? Maybe you need a project engineer later. Maybe you need some type of office assistant. Like, you're building a candidate pool. Going back to that org chart, right? It's like, if you knew that org chart, you might look and go, so I am actually in like 3 months going to need this project engineer. I know he's not quite qualified or she for the project manager position. you know what? Hey, Alex, here's what I'm going to do. Can I interview you again in 2 months if you're available? Can I call you because I'm looking ahead at where we're going to be and I think you'd be a good fit? Like all these little dial turns make a big difference in the process.
Yeah. And I think just like you said, protecting your brand, every single, if it is local, especially, every single person is going to know someone who is going to interact with your brand in some sort. Maybe it's the next candidate that applies. Maybe it's someone that calls as a lead. Maybe it's someone that's a neighbor of who's on your job, the next to your job site. But they're going to interact somehow, and you want to leave a good taste in your mouth. Every experience with someone about your brand is an opportunity to delight and to continue to build that reputation. Because at the end of the day, it's not what you say about your brand; it's what other people say about your brand that defines it. So really good there. All right. We understand that we have to have a clear understanding of what we need from our org chart down to the role specifics. We've got to have the job description. We've got to get it out to the masses with lots of lines and hooks in the water to find our ideal candidate. Let's walk into the actual selection process. You already mentioned that you may not be able to scan every single resume as well, and that may hurt you. But what are you exactly looking for when you look at a application? What allows you to select the right fit?
It's a good question. So the goal is to keep a wider net, wider web, right? Because
Yeah.
they might know somebody. So you need the resources and the bandwidth to do that. Um, One of the tricks is if you've ever been to a restaurant and you're waiting in line and then you see somebody kind of walk in and they just like walk right into the restaurant and you're like, I'm pretty sure that they weren't in line, right? You want to have a process that allows for quick progression of candidates. So
Mm.
it's really interesting. If you want to start with a very fast informal interview, right? Driver's license, where do you live? Like immediate contact. The goal of that is to push out anybody that, quickly that's not a good fit. But what it also
Yeah.
does is it allows you to take those really great candidates. Because if you have an ace, an A player, right, a 10 out of 10, let's say they just moved, give your example, Oklahoma. I just moved there because my mom's sick and I had a business. I shut it down because I need to go back and help family. Like I'm a 10. I've got maybe a week to find a job. So if you have a slow hiring process where it's like informal interview in 2 days, and then okay, great, we'll call you back when when our operations manager is available to do the second interview. That's 3 days. You've already lost them. So having a way for really good candidates to move to a skills assessment phase is so important. And a skills assessment is a way for us to validate their skill set. So like we did this in the masonry side because the old school way of validating candidate skill sets, like when we're hiring bricklayers, or block layers or concrete finishers, my dad would throw them in and he'd call me at lunch, right? He'd be like, hey, did we send them home or is he or she going to make it? And I'd be like, oh, dad, I got to send two of them home. Like, this isn't working out. One I sent home at 9. Like, that was the old way of doing construction. But it hurts culture because if you do that enough times, like me, I was like, oh, dad, you got another good one? This one's the one. We had 3 ones this week, but this is the one. Um, a skills assessment is basically they would come to my yard. I'd hand them a drawing of what they're going to build. There'd be a stack of bricks, stack of block. We'd do an intake form, right? Okay, you can do stucco? Great. You can do this? Great. You can do this? It was paid, and we got to see what they could do. So I could take somebody from informal interview to skills assessment in 24 hours.
Wow.
And then I could validate what they do, pay them really well for it. And so it opened up wonders. So if you could find a way to do this for every single role, office managers, project managers, estimators, operations managers, it eliminates the need for friction because if you're like, oh, I think this one's really good, informal interview, maybe there's a quick, semi-formal interview, we'll call it, but right to a skills assessment. Let's see if they can deliver. Because if they can, now all I got to do is go back and make sure culture fit and soft skills.
You piqued my interest
Yeah.
all the time you were talking. There's that old saying that you hire for skill and fire for attitude, and you're smiling. You've probably heard that a million times. How do you do the culture fit? That seems to be the harder one. That they're going to fit in and not be disruptive to your culture, and that they have same. How do you do that?
So I'll give you what I do for my construction company, and then we talk about other clients. But so one of the things with us is we're a passionate group of people. in the sense that you'll fit in at my company if you really love the work, right? You love masonry and concrete. Like you really love it. I mean, I know everything about it. I bricklayer 500, World of Concrete. Like, we go to the events. So we're like masonry and concrete fanatics. And so one of the things I do is during the interview process, we have questions and we ask, do you passionate about the work? Give me an example, like all that generic stuff. But I ask one powerful question. Awesome. Do you have any photos of recent work that you've done that I could see? I can tell you with about 99% accuracy that if that person has a phone filled with beautiful photos that they took at the end of a job where the work is hosed down and it looks great, and the sun is setting in the background because they worked a long day and they got that photo, every single one of us in my company has done that. Like that was me with my dad. My dad would be looking at it, and then with my foreman. So you got to find, I gave that example to say, you have to find the thing that, like, if culture is tough, right? You're gonna have to file down the edges. I think in this day and age, again, going back to the unicorn example, I don't believe that we're gonna find the perfect fit every time. I think, it's like, I'm married, my daughter's 2, right? Like I think I learned that in life, some things you can work through and grow and work towards, and other things are non-negotiable. It's non-negotiable that you're not passionate about the work at my construction company. So what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that you define your culture the most, that you're like, hey, if they have this one thing, they're probably 80-90% a fit? And then what's one way or 2 ways, going back to the mosquitoes, right? The little things that you can validate that. And that'll tell you. I mean, the photos for us, I've done this so many times. I've had a project manager and I asked them, I'll be like, hey, did he have any photos in his phone? No, his phone was broken. Okay. You feel good about him? Yeah, we should hire him. Okay. We'll see. I'll put a note on my calendar for 2 weeks. Is so-and-so still working here? Question mark. 9 times out of 10, they're not. It's
I
just a
have to
weird thing.
just mention this. About a year ago, we had an episode, and I talked about Shepherd Concrete. Remember him, Khalil?
Yeah.
What a fantastic guy was. I mean, I bring him up all the time, concrete guy. Well, we were building a parking lot, and I'm not skilled engineer, and I wanted to trust the guy. So I found this guy, and I said, hey, can we see some of your work? And he said, yeah. Sunday afternoon, he comes and he gets me. We drive about 30 miles, showing me, we're driving through parking lots, and he's pointing down. But then he pulls over, and he pulled out 150 pictures on his phone. Those 2-inch rebar in there, that's 20 feet deep. This took us, and I mean, I was tired of looking at the pictures, but I knew I had my guy, and he turned out to be so good. I mean, I still recommend him if anybody needs concrete down here. Bill Shepherd at Shepherd Concrete, call me. Right. But anyway, yeah, exactly.
This episode sponsored by.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was exactly that. As soon as you said that, I thought, oh yeah, that is, I wasn't trying to work for him, but he sold me completely because he just loved it. And anybody that loves it that much isn't going to mess you up. Anyway, just.
So
That's amazing.
So we understand kind of what we're looking for, and we kind of understand that we need to have that fast pass, is what I would call it, VIP lane, whatever, for the A players. But I want to understand really what I consider to be one of the most important things with candidates is an onboarding process, and I really see a lack of it in the construction industry. Typically, it's really just kind of like what you mentioned your dad does for the skills assessment, where it's just throw them on the job site and see what happens type thing, or have them follow around Rick and see if they can learn from Rick over for a week and then put them on their own, right? So what do you talk about with onboarding process? What's important to you and your team and the clients that you work for?
Thinking back to what we put in the course, because we've got a more robust version of it because we've tweaked it over the years internally in our companies. But I mean, the main thing, so I'm a simple guy, right? Don't have a business degree, started laying brick when I was 9. So everything to me comes down to like, what are we after? So what is onboarding? I'm trying to set them up for success. So I know it's like the first impression of any restaurant or anywhere you go. I know the first few days matter the most. So we look at the first 2 weeks, and then I look at the first 2 days specifically. And there's a checklist that we have. So it's like, do you have your logins? who's your, who do you go to for what certain problems you have, communication. Um, we do a buddy system, right? So they have one person they can go to at all times, unless it falls under certain categories, then they escalate it. Like what is the goal of the onboarding? But so I think it's having a checklist with the main goal of setting them up for success and saying, okay, for the first, day, 2 days, and 2 weeks, what's everything they need, um, and making sure that they have that, and establishing your company, your culture, introductions. There's a lot to that. So this is a time consuming one, but when you do it once and do it right, you can rinse and repeat. Um, so I think that's really important. But I think what I found that might be a little bit more important for busy companies is having a process for when your onboarding isn't perfect. And that process is, if you establish a check-in. So like if you come work at our construction company, we have a check-in at the 2 week point, 30 days, 90 days, and 120 days. And so we create an environment where you already know on the 14th day, you're going to sit down with your direct report. You're going to check in, how's things going? This is working, this is not. And so when you establish an open line of communication, it doesn't feel like this big, heavy thing where it's like, oh my gosh, I've been here for 2 weeks and they're pulling me in the office. They got to tell me something. What did I do? Am I going to make it? So I think having the communication in place and having a plan for if things don't go perfectly is just as important as having a really good plan, because it's a catch-all, right? At 14 days, if something's not perfect, they'll bring it up, they'll communicate. You can work through things if they're the right person. So I think it's a two-sided coin.
Yeah, definitely. I always think with onboarding, you dedicate the things that we've talked about from start to finish of getting a clear understanding, getting the job descriptions, knowing your org chart, doing the interviews, having a speed to lead, all this stuff takes a lot of time and diligence. And I see too many people say that it didn't work out with this candidate when they didn't put any time into the onboarding process of thinking about what the experience is going to be like on day one, what they're going to know about our company and our customers, how are they going to meet the team, what are those interactions going to be like? If they have a question, can they only go to the direct report, or who are the other people in the team they can ask questions to when the direct report's busy with whatever he's got going on? So I think that onboarding process is so critical, and you should invest a lot of time and energy in your hiring funnel per se and how that works from start to finish. But do it just as much if you can, if not more, on the onboarding process. Because if you find the right person, but you don't give them the attention and time and resources that they need to be able to succeed, then you've really just spent all this time for nothing, because they're gone. So anyways, that's my 2 cents. I love it. What are we missing, man? What else is a part of this process that we should know, Matt?
Oh man.
We've covered 63 modules and we've covered
Yeah.
8. Retention.
Yeah, exactly.
Retention maybe is something we can stick
Yeah.
on the end here before we get really into. I'm really interested in seeing and hearing about your 63 module course. But retention, one of the biggest things, it's like keeping a customer is a lot better than trying to acquire new ones
Yeah.
all the time.
So we found that if these, like the onboarding and the retention are huge. They're my retention is my favorite. They're very bespoke, right? And so every company we've seen onboarding that's completely different and successful, right? We've seen some companies where they come running in and they're like celebrities and they're like clapping and oh my god, screaming, right? And we've seen other companies where it's like you show up, they're like, look, what kind of coffee you like? They have it for you. It's more intimate. So I want to go back to that for 1 second and just say, like, it's okay to find the processes that work for your company. And we do this for companies, US, Canada. We're about to go into the UK market and Australia market. So like we've seen different onboarding plans, and there's a wide range of things that work as long as you put the time and attention and the fundamentals, like for sure, super important. Same thing with culture, right? And how we retain people. It needs to be unique to your company, but the principles of culture, if you ask yourself, so a couple of things we do that are like principle based that anybody can do. One is what's called an honest employee audit. So we've created a framework of questions on a 1 to 10 scale that gives us a pulse check of how everybody in the company is feeling. On a scale of 1 to 10, how valued do I feel for my hard work? On a scale of 1 to 10, how heard is the input that I instill in my company? I don't remember them all offhand, but this is really important because as you have more layers in your company, your managers are like, yeah, everyone in the field is happy. They love it. Everyone's good. Right. And then Tom quits and you're like, what happened? It's like, oh, Tom had a bad day. And, Tom's family life's getting in the way. And right. When we do these honest employee audits, we recommend you do them quarterly at least. What you'll find is like we did one early on this year. I mean, February now, but like in early January, business owner was certain everyone was happy. He got an average of 3 out of 10 for happiness around pay. I'm like, that's the data. I mean, they clicked the button. You had 28 employees and 30% satisfaction. So having a way in which you can see the problems is huge, right? For culture. Because it's like, how do I maintain it, create it, or fix it? Got to know what the problems are. So that's one. Assuming I have that, the other question I'd ask myself is, what is our culture? So we want to clearly define it. And the big thing I would look at is how are you creating fun and connection? Like, what does that look like? So, for example, like if you look at us as humans, right? It's like, well, we need water, we need food, we need shelter. Like those things, you're not usually having fun if you don't have those 3 things. Fun is like the bonus. So if you look at it with a company, it's the same concept. It's like when the work isn't super stressful, when you have enough people, fun is like the last thing you get to. It's like, we'll have fun when everything else is done. I like to flip it and say, where can I make things more fun and more exciting? Because I think when you consider somebody's willing to spend their career there, how do you create fun? How do you create engagement? How are you making people feel rewarded? So are you celebrating birthdays? Do you do company events where everyone gets together? We have some companies that'll do a spin wheel with basic prizes, and they'll give away like a company branded poker chip for like things that they like to see done. And once a month they get together, they redeem their spins, you can win really cool stuff. Like it's, how are you making people feel special? How are you creating and fostering that teamwork? And then the best companies you'll find fun. They do Halloween things. And a lot of the smaller companies, like when we were much smaller, fun was the last thing on my mind.
Yeah. I think retention is a whole nother topic that deserves so much time, because if you are not retaining employees, let's say the average lifetime at your company is 2 years, essentially every 2 years you have a new company and you're going to be stuck in the same problems. And if you're always having the same problems, you're not growing. You're going to have problems, but they need to be progressing onto the next problem, not we're always dealing with the same crap. So retention is worth so much. I mean, everything that we just talked about for hiring, if you retain an employee, you don't have to go through that for one more person, So every time you retain it, you don't have to go through that process. Obviously you're going to grow and you're going to have to go through the hiring process regardless, but you don't want to work backwards. So man, this has been a lot of fun. I think this is such valuable information for our listeners. You've mentioned several things. I want to give you a moment to kind of share about each of them and how people can find access to your course, your service, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I've had a blast too. This has been great. So
yeah,
thank you both. The website for the company, the Contractor Consultants, plural with that S at the end there, .com. We have a course that we built on this topic. So how do you find them? How do you vet them? How do you hire? Do you mail the offer letter? Do you bring them in, right? What's the hiring process like? And then how do you retain them? And then we do this for companies. So we take like the administrative burden off of companies. We generate the candidates for them, screen them. We sift, sort, and screen. We set final approved interviews on their calendar. And then we help with the candidate rejection process. So we take responsibility for that result for a small monthly fee. So if anyone's struggling, we'd be happy to sure our team can help.
Excellent. Well, Martin, anything you have before we
No,
go?
I tell you, this is fantastic, and I'm going to get on there. Now, is the course behind a paywall, the 63 module course? I would presume.
Yeah.
It would be. It better be.
I mean, as a whole course, or
how much does the course cost?
So the course is, I gotta see, because sometimes we have special things going on, so I'd have to check on that one. This is gonna be timestamped forever. I don't wanna misguide anyone.
But
all right, well, check out. You can see the price. It's listed on the website.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
Okay. There we go. Good. We'll have all that in the show notes for listeners. Matt, thanks for being on. Listeners, please subscribe. Would love to have you as a follower here, but also on our other channels on social media, as well as especially YouTube. And hope that you have better processes and better luck, or not luck, better success with your hiring. Yeah, it's not luck. It's not luck. All right. Take care, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to The Cashflow Contractor. Check out our website in the show notes or visit thecashflowcontractor.com.